for joining this talk. I will talk today about Symfony 4. Thanks organizers for inviting me to speak here. This is my third time at this conference, but first time as a speaker. And second, of course, thanks to all sponsors for making so much effort for making this event happen. So a few words about me. My name is Peric-Mazar. I'm from Croatia, Split. I'm the CEO of Locastic, and I'm also quite involved in community in my hometown. So basically the two second things on the list are Tinel Meetup and NGO Blockada, who are doing some events, organizing conferences and a monthly event in our hometown. For the last 10 years, I'm doing web development, so I work with all kind of the clients from all parts of the world. And from 2012, I'm using Symfony as my primary tool for backend development. About my company, as I already told, we are based in Split in Croatia. We are doing web and mobile development for our clients. This is some of our works that we did. And also we are doing a lot of user experience and user interface design and consulting for our clients. So that's basically about me and my company. Before I start talking, I want to know you better. So who is using Symfony as a framework? Can you raise hands? And Symfony 4? Okay, a lot. Usually what happens at the conference is that still a lot of people is not using Symfony 4, and probably I assume the reason for that is that a long-term support edition is not released yet. So how I started to work as PHP developer and how I moved to the Symfony. I started during my college to do some freelancing projects. Basically at the beginning it was some small scripts. Then I set up some kind of the framework because I want to speed up development and I want to make my life easier. So I have like bunch of classes, some kind of the routing, some kind of the database manager and things like that. And that worked well back in that time. But as I grew up as developer, I wanted to use something more advanced. So I did the research and I decided I want to move to the Symfony. And at that time, Symfony 2 was in development phase and Symfony 1.4 was like in long-term support. So I decided before starting with Symfony 2 to take one project with Symfony 1.4, and basically that's how my career with Symfony started. So back there, the web was totally different. We had like simple front-end applications that were supported with huge back-end solution, and we needed some kind of full-stack framework to develop that kind of application. Symfony 1.4 was exactly that kind of the framework. So we didn't have even the templating system. So basically on the front-end we will have some templating with PHP and HTML, and then we will have like really fat back-end solution for providing that, for rendering that kind of the websites. In Symfony 1.4 we had some kind of the plugins, but that was downloading zip file, adding to your project, configuring and then using. It was really like not easy as today, because not even Composer existed back in that time. So Symfony 1.4 was in that time good fit, I will say, for mid and larger applications. It was clear separation inside the framework, so you had front-end application, you had back-end application, they shared the model, and you had in a distribution you have also admin generator, and most of the backends were generated by that admin from console. In 2009, Symfony 2 was released. Still, we didn't have Composer at the beginning, and we didn't have namespaces at the beginning of Symfony 2. But as we got the Composer, as we got the namespaces, the framework got better, and of course our life as Symfony developers or PHP developers improved a lot. What was the biggest improvement of Symfony 2 was idea to build a framework around standalone separated components. So that gives flexibility to the developers to build their own framework and to use it in each way they want. So that was a good idea, but actually didn't work very well in practice, because usually we end up with using standard edition. I will talk a little bit later about that. Some developers took components and built their own framework, but in 99% of the cases they will end up using the Symfony again. So that was a little bit like the idea was good, and some developers managed to build their own stack based on Symfony components, but it was not like as we expected. What Symfony 2 introduced also were bundles. So bundles, the idea of bundles was to separate the code in like one part. For example, if you are building blog or contact page or something like that, you will group that part of the code inside the bundles. So it was quite a different idea from separating front-end and back-end application in Symfony 1.4 to separate that in a bundles. An idea of bundles was to be reused in next projects that you are working, but usually I don't think that anyone is reusing the code in that way. So if you are reusing something, you will build some bundle, you will separate that as a third-party library, and then you will use it in that way. Symfony 3, in 2015, actually, Symfony had 10 years celebration, so that's like quite a good sign for us because that framework exists for 10 years now, actually more. And Symfony 3 was very boring addition because Symfony 3 didn't have anything new. It was just transition phase from Symfony 2 to Symfony 4. So it was like maybe the worst release ever, and it was the slowest one. In 2017, on the last day of November, Symfony 4 was released. And Symfony 4 changed entire concepts how we are building the application. So basically what we have now, we are actually starting with micro framework, so we can set up our own stack and use it in any way that we want. So if we compare this edition, you can see that Symfony 3 is just Symfony 2.8 minus deprecated features. Then Symfony 4.0 was Symfony 3.4 deprecated features plus new way of developing application. And that's actually the thing that I want to talk today, like what's changed from Symfony 2.3 to Symfony 4. So what we could do better was mostly managing the dependencies inside our project. So if you wanted to add some bundle to your application, usually you download it with Composer, then you need to configure everything, then you need to test it. Sometimes you don't want to use that, and then you need to remove that everything manually. So that was something that can be automated, but we didn't have a way for doing that. The standard edition, as I mentioned already, was not a good one. So basically, a lot of projects start just downloading the standard edition and then start writing the code. So if you need to build some small web services or if you need to build some console application, you will usually do the same thing. And then you have like 72 packages and most of the code that you are not using. So you have a feeling that there is a lot of things inside your code base that you actually don't need. So I don't know how many of you tried, for example, remove the form component from Symfony 2 Standard Edition. That was very painful because there was a lot of dependencies on the other things. And for example, in Symfony 4, we don't even have forms in Skeleton in Basic Edition. So this is the philosophy behind the Symfony 4, as Fabian Potassier stated on his blog, that we want a framework which starts as a small one, and then we want to add things and improve it as we need it. So my first project on Symfony 4 was small, well actually it ended up as a big one, web scraper for one website. So what I needed is only console, and I needed to parse data from some websites. Later I need a database, so I add Doctrine, then I need some other things like admin, I just keep up adding things. But I started small, I didn't use things that I don't need. So this is if you take this statement, this is the keywords. Start small, be able to grow. Your choice and framework should not get in your way. And that's what we have today with Symfony 4. So basically we are no longer using inheritance, like downloading standard edition and then inherit all the things from there. We are basically composing our application by ourselves. So we are choosing what we will have inside the stack, we are choosing how we will use that, and we can affect much more in how our application is performing actually. So the idea behind Symfony 4 is, as I mentioned already, start as a micro framework. Then compose your application, use the things you know you need, and then build anything you want. Like, do you want to build console application, like a really small one? Do you want to build traditional website, or just some kind of the web services? Of course, all good things comes with the casualties. So we are no longer have support for the Silex because Silex is dead. We don't need the Silex because Symfony can do the same things as Silex was doing. You all know what was Silex? Anybody that doesn't know? Okay, it was micro framework based on Symfony components. So if you have like really small API project, it was a good way to use Silex. So some fun facts about Composer. The idea behind the Composer was to have plugin-like system for managing dependencies inside Symfony and PHBB. But it ended up like nobody used that in that way. Why? Because, as I mentioned, we need to download something, we need to configure that, and then we need to use that or remove that. So that was like a not very good way of using that. So we got a Flex. Flex is a new thing related to Symfony 4. So it's basically Composer plugin that do some additional things for us. So it hooks to require, remove, and update functions of Composer and do some additional things. How it works? It works in a very easy way. We have some Symfony Flex server which has some receipts. And then once we require something in Composer, for example, Composer require mail, he asks the server, do you have receipt for this? If server says, I don't have receipt, nothing happens, so we need still to do manually all the things. But if server says, yes, I have a receipt, then he decides which packages to install and how to configure them. So basically, entire configuration, which we were doing manually, is now done automatically for us. So receipt looks like this. So basically, it's just simple JSON file called manifest.json. And it says at the beginning, okay, to bundles, enable this bundle with this namespace for all. That means for all environment that we have inside the project. Copy from the receipt, that means copy folder from configuration file on repository to our project. So basically what we were doing manually. To the environment variables, add these three variables, and this alias means that we can use Composer require mailer, mail, or full path Symfony/mailer. We will get the same thing. There are two repositories related for Symfony Flex. One is Symfony Receipts, which is maintained by Symfony core team, and only receipts that are provided like high quality, that are opinionated by core team, can go inside that repository. So you cannot like contribute, you can contribute there, but of course you need to get approved your pull request. And that repository is the only difference between first one and the second one is that they can use aliases. So in the first one you can use this aliases here, but in the second contrib repository you can contribute whatever you want, you can put any receipt you want, but the difference is that you cannot use aliases. Also, there is flex.symfony.com website where you can go and see which receipts we have today. At the beginning, like when Symfony 4.4 was released, we didn't have so big support for all the packages that are listed now here, but as time goes, we have more and more in the receipts. So you can check what's inside, you can go to the GitHub, you can see what's happening inside configuration, and then you can use it or you can build your own receipt for your own package. As you can see, we have two colors. One is orange, which is contrib, and we have green one, which is official receipt. So installing the Symfony 4. I mentioned Symfony 1.4, I mentioned Symfony 2. So we started from downloading zip file to downloading some Symfony application to install this Symfony itself. Then we moved to Composer. Then we stayed there for a while. And today we still can use Composer for starting the new project. But there is actually a better way. This is the free ways of starting the project. You can start with Symfony skeleton package, which is bare nothing, just base dependency on framework, and Symfony website skeleton, which is actually same as traditional distribution of Symfony standard distribution. Or you can start learning and playing with Symfony, that's Symfony/demo. But there is a better way. From my perspective, maybe someone will not agree with me. You can use Symfony Client actually again. And Symfony Client has a lot of hidden features inside itself. So basically it contains PHP server. So you can type Symfony serve and you will get your application up and running. But this is some of the features that are actually supported inside Symfony client. So you can start new project. We will see that later. That supports different versions of PHP. It supports local HTTP2 server, generates TLS certificates, check your security issues, and seamlessly integrate. If you are using Symfony Cloud, it's very easy to deploy to the Symfony Cloud. And it works on Windows also. That's like a cool feature. Starting a new project with Symfony client is very easy. Symfony new, name of the project, or Symfony full, new name of the project if you want to download the entire website skeleton. So how it works? It works very easy. I hope you can see it in last rows. So Symfony new project, it will download the bare skeleton of the project. And then just Symfony serve. As you can notice, I didn't run it until I didn't generate HTTPS. So it says like warning, I can do that or run it without. And that's it. My project is up and running and I can start working. This is the first page that you will see if you don't have any controller inside your application. Okay. What about code structure? Code structure in Symfony 4 is way more natural than in Symfony 2, 3, and 1. It's not even comparable to this. So basically what we have bin, config, public, src, var, vendor folders, and inside config, that's the place for entire configuration. Usually in previous version of Symfony, we had configuration through the bundles for our application, or in a way how we separated. Now we are keeping entire configuration there, and 99% of your receipts will just copy-pasted files there in your configuration file. Of course, you need to commit that files and deploy it to your production and put it in your repository. Second one is that public. We don't longer have web folder for our public folder. Public is way more natural on web servers, and we don't have different controllers for different environments. We have only index PHP that depends on environment variable and configuration inside environment variable. I will show that later. So it's just one controller now. Your entire code goes to src folder as always, but it's not separated to bundles. Cache log folder, it's inside vir folder, and then we have vendors and we have environment variables here. I will talk about them on the next slide. Before that, we have something new, which is here. It's called Symfony lock. The Symfony lock is used for Symfony Flex to track which receipts are installed in the project. So if you install something and you want to remove something, Flex can check that here, what it did, and it can remove it from your project. Environment variables. So we replace the parameters YAML with environment variables, which are more flexible, but they are not secure. So have that in mind. Don't put secrets and commit that to your repositories or things like that. And this is what we are committing and what we are actually using locally. So we have .env file, which commits, and all defaults variable that you need for your application up and running goes there. This is the n.local, which doesn't go to repository, and you use that for set up your local environment. It's the same for .test and .test local. So this will be defaults and things used for continuous integration, continuous delivery thing. And then this is the local that you will use locally for your configuration for test. And once again, just don't put secrets in this file, because usually when Symfony 4 was released, like people will Google for this file, then it will see, okay, this is the Symfony application, then usually there is inside username and the password for your database. So that's not something very clever to do. Okay, bundleless application. Who is using bundles? Who used bundles? Okay, a lot of us. So when I moved to Symfony 2, bundles were like, what's this? Like, I don't like this thing. Then actually entire my code went to the bundles because it was nice to separate that. But in the end, we don't need that. If we are working on some custom projects, we will build some code for that project, we usually want to reuse that for another. So we are adding one aspect of complexity to our project, and we can organize code in a better way. We can organize everything inside SRC folder with the folders and everything, so we don't need bundles. Bundles still exist, but only for third-party libraries. So if you want to put something in community, some cool library that you have, you will still create a bundle. There is nice tutorial for that on a Symfony documentation page, but we don't need that inside our application. What's the good thing here is that reduce the perceived complexity of our project, but I will say this is even more important thing. Symfony 4 is a lot about making some things standardized, moving to standardization. So basically half of you raise the hand that is using bundles, half of you raise that you are not using the bundles. Now nobody of us will use the bundles. So we have like one step more forward to standardization of our Symfony application. Also, all the concept of the inheritance for the bundles that we used in Symfony 2 and part of the Symfony 4 were deprecated in 3.4. So if you start new Symfony application, you cannot override things like you did in previous versions. Okay, auto-wiring. Who is familiar with the concept? Okay, cool. So it's not new thing, because it was introduced in Symfony 3. Auto-wiring actually saves a lot of time for us, and again automates the thing that we did manually. The problem with auto-wiring, a lot of developers consider that as a magic. Like, I created some class and I inject that class to another class and that works. Wow, boom. But actually, like all good tricks that magicians do, things is very simple. So what we did in past, we created some class, okay. Then we go to services.xml or services.yaml file, depends what you use. And then we say, okay, ID for this service is ID 1 or something like that. The class that is used is this one, and then the arguments that we are injecting are that and that. And Symfony now do that automatically for us. How? We are using full qualified class names as our ID, and then Symfony can scan to your code and just create the services which are using full qualified class names as your ID. And then when you type in something inside the constructor of another service, he can find using the full qualified class name and know what to inject. So everything happens as before. Just this step of creating and setting up the configuration of your service is removed. So it will save a lot of time when you are developing. Of course, if you are doing some open source thing and you have a bunch of services, my suggestion is not to use Autowire. You can just turn it off, Autowire falls, and you can do it in traditional way. Yeah, this is important thing. It is designed to be predictable. So if Symfony cannot Autowire the thing, you will get like red exception which will say, like, for example, your service is twitter.something, it doesn't exist, we cannot wire or we cannot find it. This is the default configuration from Symfony 4. So if you download the new application and if you install it, you will see that Autowire is enabled by default. The second very important thing here is that we excluded some files from Autowiring and we auto-configure some folders as some services here, controllers. But what's very important here that in previous version of Symfony it was stated, but now it's removed because it's default. By default, all services are now private. So previously, all services were public. This had impact a little bit on performance, not a huge impact, but a little bit. But what's important that you cannot use this. And in previous Symfony versions, you extended base controller from controller. Now you have abstract controller, which access to some services in different way. Of course, you can inject services to any method. If you are, for example, want to inject something inside your controller, you can inject it in constructor or any other method. How it works? This is some Twitter client, which is our service. So its ID is app service Twitter client, so full qualified class name. And I wanted to inject this root 13 transformer to my service. So I just type hinted in constructor, and up I use full full name to that to define what I'm using, so it's namespace. And that's it. I don't need to configure these two services. This works out of the box inside Symfony 4. If you want to see which services you have inside your application, this bin console debug Autowiring, you will get the list of all services that are auto-wired here. Also, the good thing is just if you are switching to Symfony 4, it's to see which services do you have inside your stack. Why I'm saying it's a good thing, because the list you will get is much smaller than you will get in Symfony 3 and Symfony 2. So that's like, again, huge step forward. The code base of Symfony 4 is 70% reduced comparing to Symfony 3. Okay, some front-end things. Who use Encore? Okay, a few people. So Encore, Webpack Encore, like in the past, probably you used a static bundle, I assume. That was not a good solution, right? It was if you compare to front-end technology that was like really slow in developing, it was like you never knew what you will get as output, how to set up and everything else. So what they decide to do is to build Web Encore, and it's a very simple way to integrate the Webpack inside your application. It wraps Webpack, giving you the simple API and powerful API for JavaScript modules. It is inspired by Webpacker and Mix, but it stays in spirit of a Webpack. So basically what you need if you want to use it, you just need to do Composer require Webpack and Core, and it can work outside of Symfony also. Once you run that in Composer, you will get this configuration file, but you will also get some new folders. You see, and the app is assets, CSS, and JS folder. That's the folder where your working files goes. And we have some simple configuration with everything is explained. Of course, it can do more things than is just in default. And after you configure it once, you will be, I will say, very comfortable for using this. Even your front-end team will be very, very comfortable with using this, because they will have the place where they are writing CSS, where they are writing JS. They will have templates folder once you require Twig, where all templates go, so it's much easier to navigate. It's much easier to separate backend and frontend, and this will compile and build all the files automatically for you, for them, for your team. Okay, regarding performance, Fabian ran one test, and then he stated that Symfony 4 is almost 3 times faster than Laravel 5.5, which is true if you run Hello World test. But the reason is that because Symfony doesn't have dependencies. So this is like good marketing trick, I will say, but in real, if we set up the exact same stacks, Symfony is still faster than Laravel. Not for 3 times, but slightly faster. Regarding the performance comparing to previous versions, Symfony 2 was the fastest released before Symfony 4, and 3.4, so the last long-term support version, was the slowest one. Probably the reason was because there is a lot of deprecated features inside it, so now once they are removed, we got a really fast Symfony, which is a very good thing for us. Another very, very good thing about Symfony is planning of releases. So basically we have stability and predictability, so you can know for each version when it will be released, how long it will be supported, and basically on top of that you can decide what to use. As you can notice here, we still don't have long-term support for Symfony 4, and I think that's one of the main reasons why more developers are not using the Symfony at the moment. But still, if you are starting the new project, I will suggest you to try Symfony 4. Okay, updating the existing projects sorry, to Symfony 4, it's possible. Of course, it will take some time for you, because especially if you are working on lower version than 3.4, so my advice is to upgrade first to Symfony 3.4 and then move to Symfony 4 and up. Why? Because there is a same list of the features is included in Symfony 3.4 and Symfony 4, just there is a lot of deprecated code. I think it works updating, but just don't think that if you have like huge project, this won't be like 2 days upgrade. It will take a lot of time. So the latest version of Symfony was released a few days ago. It's Symfony 4.3. It was released on the last day of May. And it has a huge list of the upgrades. So basically I didn't have that much space on the slides to list all the things that were updated, but you have nice blog posts where the entire list is updated here. One of my favorite thing from Symfony 4 is a messenger component. I saw on a list there is a talk about that, so I advise you to go there and listen. It's very useful component if you are using message queues like RabbitMQ or something else. It's very easy to set up, very easy to use, and it's quite powerful. Okay, regarding the philosophy behind the Symfony and why they all changed, everything is that the spirit is keep coding your features. Don't bother with like removing forms from Symfony stack or something like that. Just do what you need. If you need to have really simple web crawler, you will do that very easy with console and with console component. If you need some powerful backend system for your website, you can use Symfony API platform with just typing composer require API inside your terminal. So basically, this allows you to focus on your logic, on your business logic, on your project, and not focusing on framework. Of course, it will be nice to see what is inside the components. Maybe you don't need the entire component, maybe you just need a small part of it, so you can remove the component and use some newer custom code. But that depends on you. Just get the idea what's happening inside framework and take care about performance of your application. So a year later, this is not a year later from the release, this is a year later that we started to use Symfony 4. And the working with Symfony 4, it seems like to be much nicer, much easier. You have the feeling all the time that you are controlling everything, that you are building your stack, and basically that's the true. And prototyping, if you are building a new project, it's way faster in Symfony 4. So you don't need to spend time on configuring the Autowiring and configuring the services and other things, but you can focus on building your application. I mentioned that already, but I love to repeat that Flex is an amazing thing, and this is way more important, the better standardization of Symfony applications. What I can see as a potential problem is that people will forget what actually dependency injection is and how to configure that. I'm not talking about like Symfony developers with 2-3 years of experience, but for the new developers, because now that logic is hidden, like let's call it with some magic, even that it's not magic. So basically with good documentation, and if they have someone to mentor them, or if they dig a little bit, they could understand what's happening inside it. But that could be a problem, because now we have like some interface between developer and Symfony framework, which hides some complexity in behind. Symfony is also great as a micro framework. I mentioned that already, and I think now we really have framework that is not limitation for any application. And for the end of my talks, this is the current status as an image. So development of Symfony 5 has already started. So that's the reason why I put on a list the schedule with releases, because if it is promised that it will be released, I don't know, on last day of November 2017, you can count on that will happen. And this is amazing part of Symfony community, which found a way how to deliver everything on time, and there are a lot of smart people who are doing amazing work inside community. So that's again one of the strength points of framework. Okay, thank you.